30 seconds. That's all it takes to change everything. The lights were bright, laughter was loud, and then silence. Steve Harvey stopped mid-joke. His hand froze above the buzzer card. The studio froze with him. He stepped down from the stage, the cameras following as if pulled by gravity. A small boy sat in the third row wearing a blue beanie, holding a toy car. His mother's eyes glistened, and beside her, an elderly woman clutched a folded letter. Steve took off his jacket and gently placed it over the boy's shoulders. No aplausos, no punchline. Just a moment of raw, unfiltered humanity. Earlier that afternoon, everything had been routine. The lights, the laughter, the controlled chaos that keeps a TV show alive. Steve had gone over his cards, made the crew laugh, and reminded everyone, as he always did, if I need to stop, I stop. The producer smiled nervously. Steve, if you stop, the clock keeps running. Steve looked up serious. And if I don't, maybe someone else's clock won't. He noticed the family long before the cameras did. The boy Eli, small and pale. The mother, anxious but steady. The grandmother, quiet, with that letter always between her fingers. 2 rows away, a widower rubbed his wedding ring over and over, polishing absence into memory. The show began. The crowd cheered. The game rolled forward like a machine. But Steve saw more than a game. He saw signals, the cough of a sick child, the silent prayer of a grandmother, the ache behind a forced smile. He knew the signs. When round 2 began, the question hit too close to home. Name something you bring to a hospital. The audience laughed awkwardly. The widower looked down. The grandmother closed her eyes. The boy coughed again, and something in Steve broke. He looked toward the producers. They shook their heads. He set the car down. Time out, he said. The audience chuckled, thinking it was part of the act. No, Steve said quietly. For real. Time out. He walked off the stage. The cameras hesitated, then followed. The crowd went still. He knelt beside Eli. You cold, little man? The boy nodded. A little. Steve smiled. Not anymore. He wrapped his jacket tighter around him. Then he turned to the grandmother. Ma'am, what's that letter you keep holding? She trembled a little. It's for you, she said. But I thought I'd give it to you after the show. After is a luxury some folks don't get, Steve whispered. He took the letter and opened it. It was from her late husband, Lester. He had written it before he passed, telling Steve how much laughter had meant to him in his last days. He'd written, You make dying sound less final, Steve. The grandmother had rewritten the letter in her own hand and brought it that night to say thank you. Steve's eyes filled. Ma'am, you just gave me something no show ever could. He looked around. We're not stopping this show, he said. We're expanding it. He waved to the 2 families on stage. Come down here. Let's make one big family tonight. They obeyed, uncertain but moved. Tell me one thing you wish someone had given you when you were hurting. The answers came like confessions. Time, help, childcare, permission to cry, permission to laugh again. A stagehand brought a whiteboard, and someone started writing them down. It wasn't Family Feud anymore. It was something truer, something real. Steve looked at Eli again. He pulled out a marker and signed the inside of his jacket. For Eli, he wrote, for warmth that outlives the lights. He slid his business card into the pocket. Your mama's going to need help. This number, call it. We'll figure it out. The crowd was silent. For a moment, the studio felt like a church. A producer whispered in Steve's ear, We're running long. Steve shook his head. Mercy doesn't punch out. He turned back to the audience. Everybody stand up, he said. If you've ever needed help and didn't know how to ask, stand up. One by one, they did. At home, he said into the camera, you too. Stand up in your living room. Say out loud the one thing you need. Don't be cute. Be honest. The room became still, heavy with quiet truth. He looked into the lens. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. The line hit like thunder through silence. He turned back to the game. Let's play fast money, he said. But tonight, the money goes to something that stretches the meaning of winning. The questions were simple, almost poetic. What do you keep even when it's broken? A promise. Name a sound you miss. Her laugh. Name a smell that makes a house a home. Sunday grease on the stove. When the board hit the winning number, confetti prepared to fall. Steve raised his hand. "Wait," he said. "Not yet." He called Eli, his mother, and grandmother to the front. The red and blue teams surrounded them. The audience stood. "This jacket," Steve said, "isn't mine anymore. It's ours." He draped it around Eli once more. "And this letter stays with me." The audience erupted. Some cried, some clapped, most just stood in awe. Steve looked into the lights and said, "We sell victory, but what we really give is connection. You're not alone, even when it feels like it." When the show ended, the cameras turned off, but Steve stayed. He read the letter again in his dressing room and pinned it to his mirror. On days when laughter feels forced, he reads it out loud. He told his team to add something new to every taping, a neighborhood minute. A moment to remind the world that television doesn't have to entertain. It can heal. He started sending quiet checks to families who couldn't afford treatment. He funded a transportation fund for parents visiting hospitals. He did it quietly because mercy doesn't advertise. The jacket never returned to his wardrobe. He missed it sometimes, but he liked knowing it had a new life. Objects, he often says, are just tools until love gives them a job. Months later, letters poured in. Not about the show, but about people stopping, teachers pausing class to listen, workers halting a meeting to hug a colleague. Steve read everyone he could. Sometimes before taping, he'd whisper, "Let's go make a neighborhood again." He changed that night. The world didn't see it, but those who were there knew. Something sacred had happened on a soundstage built for laughter. And if you look closely enough, even now, under all the bright lights, you can still see the glint of that moment. The boy in the blue beanie, the grandmother's letter, and the man who stopped the show to remind us what it means to be human. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten weeks past, but that night would not let Steve go. He could still hear the soft scrape of Eli's toy car against his jacket, could still see the grandmother's trembling hands offering that letter like a prayer wrapped in paper. It stayed with him in quiet moments, when the laughter died down, when the lights went dark, when the applause faded into the hum of the empty studio. Something in him had shifted that evening. He had always believed in laughter as medicine, but that night, he realized that medicine wasn't enough. Sometimes, people didn't need to be cured. They needed to be carried. It was late one evening when his assistant knocked on the door. "Steve, you've got mail," she said, holding a large stack of envelopes. More letters from the audience. He smiled wearily. Let's see what the world has to say tonight. He sifted through them. Some were thank yous, some were confessions, many were simply stories. A mother wrote about her son who had seen Eli on screen and decided to give away his favorite toy car to a child in the hospital. A nurse from Ohio wrote, "We started playing your clip in the children's ward. It's the only moment the kids stopped crying." But one letter stopped him cold. It was from Eli's grandmother. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. "Dear Mr. Harvey, Eli wanted to thank you himself, but he's resting now. The doctors say he has good days and hard days, but every day he wears your jacket. He calls it his armor. He says it smells like hope and stage lights. When he wears it, he tells people he's ready for another round. You made him feel like a player in life again, not just a patient. I don't know if words are enough, but thank you for letting him be part of something bigger than sickness." Steve read it 3 times. He placed the letter beside Lester's and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like a host or a comedian or a celebrity. He felt like a servant to something sacred, the quiet duty of making people feel seen. The next week, he called his production team for a meeting. "We're changing the format," he said. The room went silent. "Every episode, we're going to give away 1 minute. Not to a sponsor, not to a game, but to a person. Someone in the audience who needs to be heard." A producer frowned. "That's not television, Steve." He leaned forward. "Then we'll make it television. The right kind." They tried it. The first Neighborhood Minute featured a single father who had lost his job but refused to miss a day volunteering at the community kitchen. The second was a teacher fighting cancer who still showed up for her students. The third was a janitor who'd been secretly paying for a student's lunch for 3 years. Every time, Steve would pause the show, walk down the stairs, and listen. The ratings didn't drop. they soared. But what mattered more were the letters that followed. Viewers didn't just watch, they acted. They helped. They gave. During one taping, a teenager approached him afterward. "Mr. Harvey," he said, "I don't have much, but I gave my sneakers to a kid who didn't have any." Steve smiled. "And what did you get in return?" The boy grinned shyly. "Peace, sir." Steve nodded. "That's the only thing worth keeping." Months later, Eli returned to the studio. Thinner but smiling. The jacket hung a little looser on him now, but he wore it proudly. When Steve saw him, he froze. The audience didn't know what was happening. They just saw a man step off stage and run toward a child. Steve lifted him up, holding him against his chest. "Blue Lightning," he said softly. "You came back. Ili longhed vikli. Told you I would." The crowd clapped, unsure if they should cry or cheer. The cameras caught everything. The warmth, the trembling, the quiet strength in that fragile embrace. Steve knelt beside him. "You ready to play one more round?" he asked. Ili nodded. They played a shortened version of Fast Money. The questions were gentle, crafted with care. "Name something that gives you strength." Eli said kindness. "Name something that lasts longer than pain." Ili smiled. "Love." The scoreboard lit up. The numbers didn't matter. The studio was silent, everyone fighting back tears. Steve whispered, "You already won, little man. You just reminded us how." After that episode aired, letters poured in from around the world. Churches screened it during services. Schools played it for assemblies. Parents watched it with their kids, and kids hugged their parents tighter. The clip went viral, but Steve didn't care about that. What mattered was what followed. Strangers helping strangers. People writing to say they had stopped long enough to see each other. A few months later, another letter came. It was short. Eli passed peacefully. "He wore your jacket until the very end. Thank you for giving him light." Steve sat alone in his office that night. He didn't cry right away. He just sat, staring at the letter, his hands trembling slightly. Then he stood, took a deep breath, and walked to his dressing room mirror. He looked at himself, not as the man on TV, but as a man reminded of purpose. He reached into the pocket of his suit, pulled out his handkerchief, and whispered, "All right, God, I hear you. Keep me soft." The next morning, he showed up early for filming. Before the crew arrived, he placed Eli's photo beside Lester's letter and whispered, "You both stay close. You remind me how to work." Then he looked around the empty set, the buzzers, the lights, the still air, and smiled. When the audience filled in, he began to show as usual, jokes and laughter intact. But when the moment came, he stopped again, looked straight into the camera, and said, "We don't get to choose our pain, but we do get to choose our purpose. And maybe our purpose is to stop pretending we're fine and start showing up for each other." The crowd stood, some crying, some clapping, all changed. And somewhere beyond the lights, in that invisible balcony he often spoke of, Steve imagined Lester, the grandmother, and Eli watching, smiling down, whispering, "Keep going, Steve. They still need you." He smiled, eyes glistening, and whispered back, "I will." Then he turned to the crowd, his voice steady but thick with feeling. "Now let's play the game. Because laughter," he said, pausing, "is just love on the move.